Perang Rusia versus Ukraina sudah dimulai sejak 24 Februari 2022. Rusia melancarkan invasi besar-besaran ke Ukraina setelah Presiden Vladimir Putin mengumumkan operasi militer secara resmi. Setahun lebih terlibat perang dengan Ukraina, Rusia sudah mendapat banyak sanksi dari Barat sejak awal. Uni Eropa menerapkan sanksi terhadap Rusia berupa tindak pembatasan, sanksi ekonomi, dan tindakan visa. Sedangkan, hubungan Rusia dan Indonesia selama beberapa tahun terakhir ini mencapai tahap baru dan dialog antar parlemen yang efektif pun telah terjadi. Dalam bidang perdagangan, Indonesia adalah salah satu mitra utama Rusia di ASEAN. Berikut, wawancara bisnis Indonesia dengan Duta Besar Rusia untuk Indonesia, Lyudmila Vorobieva.
Coming back to our bilateral relations, last year we've seen a very active political dialogue. As you know, President Joko Widodo visited Moscow in June, and he had a very good meeting with President Putin. It lasted more than 2 hours, and they're calling each other brothers. There were 2 visits of our Minister of Foreign Affairs in the format of G20, but also he had bilateral meetings with the Retno Marsudi, and not only in Indonesia, but also outside Indonesia, the margins of different international forums. They had several meetings. We also saw a visit of our Speaker of our Parliament, Mrs. Matviyenko. She came for the P20, but also she had bilateral meetings with the leaders of Indonesian parliament. So the political dialogue is very active. Also, we seen development of our trade and economic relations. Our trade has increased by 30% and is now over $3 billion. In Russia, we have a different system of counting and assessing this, but we are taking Indonesian statistics, and we've seen more and more interest from Russian companies and Russian businesses to come to Indonesia. Every crisis actually opens the windows of opportunity. And as our businesses are not welcome in Europe, they are, of course, turning to our Asian friends and partners, and not traditional partners like China, but of course ASEAN, and first of all Indonesia. We have joint investment projects in Indonesia. Maybe it's not enough, and of course it's not enough, but still we do have, it's mainly in oil, mining. We have a project on construction of an oil refinery in Tuban, which is progressing. There's also a Russian company involved in exploration of gas and oil fields in Tuna. We have IT companies operating in Indonesia, and one of the big successes is Taksi Maxim. Maybe you've seen it in many cities of Indonesia. It's operated by a Russian IT company. We can do much more, of course, and we're exploring these opportunities. If we look at humanitarian exchanges, we have now around 800 Indonesian students studying in Russia, because we provide scholarships, government scholarships for Indonesian nationals, 300 per year. Again, we can do more, but we hope that in the future these numbers will increase. And it's a very wide array of specialities that you can study in Russia, beginning from music to physics, mathematics, science, engineering, etc., etc. Of course, we also witness increase in tourist arrivals. Of course, we cannot compare that with the pre-COVID times, but still around 60,000 tourists have visited Indonesia last year. Of course, mostly are in Bali. Mostly in Bali, but I hope that Russians will discover that Indonesia is much more than Bali. So our relations have been developing in a very positive way, and I think that we can do much more. Yes, that's what exactly I've mentioned, that though the trend is very good, but of course we can do much more. And for the joint population of more than 400 million people in our two countries, the 3 billion of course is not enough. Again, our economies are complementary because we produce things that Indonesia doesn't have, and Indonesia produce things that we cannot produce in our country. Of course, now one of the main items that we import from Indonesia is palm oil, and unlike some third parties, we don't impose any conditions, and the numbers are getting up. But not only that, of course, there is much more, and in order to increase our trade volume, what we need to do is diversify, of course. And concentrate mainly on technologies, on high-end products, and there are a lot of areas that we can look at, not only trade as such, but also investment. For instance, aircraft building. Now in Russia we are very much focused on developing and building our own aircrafts, so not to be dependent on the European or American aircraft, because there's a lot of problems with, and they are used as political instruments. During the Soviet times, we used to have a big production of commercial aircrafts. I'm talking about commercial aircrafts, of course, not military. That's a separate thing. Unfortunately, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, our Western partners have done whatever they could to destroy our aircraft building industry, but now it's being revived, and we have already designed and constructed several middle-range commercial aircraft, so that kind of cooperation can be looked at. And not only selling, but of course the production, the localization of production, or at least some of the spare parts. Shipbuilding. We also have a very developed shipbuilding industry in Russia, so this could present interest to the largest archipelago. Again, IT, pharmaceuticals, and we have actually sold some medications produced in Russia to Indonesia. Also, I know there are talks between our Russian company with local partners to have production of prosthetic arms and the body parts actually based on newest technologies, beginning from oil and gas to nuclear energy. And don't be scared by nuclear energy. We've heard that Germany has just shut down the 3 remaining reactors, and I think it's a big mistake. In Russia, for your information, you know that we are a country that is very rich in coal, oil and gas, but still 20% of our electricity is generated by nuclear facilities. We were the first country to operate a commercial nuclear plant as long ago as the 50s last century. 1954, the first commercial nuclear plant was operated in our country. And whatever people say, it's safe. Actually, it's green because, yes, there was Chernobyl and Fukushima, but Chernobyl happened 30 years ago, and now the nuclear reactors that we produce are 5 times more safe. And Fukushima was a human error and also a very old American designs. Yes, we were hoping for that. Actually, we have, and one more thing that I would like to add. That Russia is part of the Eurasian Economic Union, together with Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And in December last year, we have launched a process of negotiation on a free trade agreement between the government of Indonesia and the Eurasian Economic Union, because Russia as a country cannot engage in a free trade agreement without the other 4 members of the Eurasian Economic Union. But this process has been already launched, and recently we had the first round of negotiation here in Jakarta with the participation of the countries. All the countries involved, and it was quite successful. The second round, we hope, will take part sometime in July, and what we hear that maybe it will take just less than 2 years to complete this free trade agreement. Of course, it will be an enormous boost for our bilateral trade, and of course for the trade between Indonesia and the Eurasian Economic Union. So this is a very good development, and we're looking forward to that. Also, on bilateral level, we have a joint commission on economic cooperation. It's G2G, and it's headed from Russian side by the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Mantorov, and from Indonesian side, the Minister Coordinator, Pak Erlangga Hartarto. So we hope sometime, maybe second part of the year, we will have this commission, who didn't meet for some time because of the COVID, but hopefully. And this is the perfect place to discuss all the projects and the ways to boost our bilateral cooperation, because not only government officials will come, but also they're usually followed by business people and experts, and maybe we will also have a business forum and an industrial exposition in Aprom. So we're looking forward to that. Well, unfortunately, not all projects are implemented. Yeah, unfortunately for the railways, this project didn't go on. I think because maybe initially it was designed for coal transportation, and as the prices for coal went down, the partners who actually designed this project calculated that it was not commercially viable. So actually, though our company, it's a state-owned company, invested more than $80 million US in this project, they decided not to go on. Unfortunately, but well, yeah, business is business. Sometimes it's not going on as as it was planned. But I think nevertheless there are so many opportunities, other opportunities that can be explored, especially with the building of your new capital, Nusantara. Of course, when our two presidents met, President Joko Widodo invited Russian side to take part. And I know there have been interest from several parties in Russia, including the government of Moscow, actually. As you know, Moscow is the capital, and please visit Moscow sometime. And despite all the Hollywood movies and Western media accusation, Moscow is one of the most comfortable and safe cities in Europe. It's very modern, it's very comfortable. There is a lot of smart cities technologies. So I think that that's what we can share. I hope that, this will develop, and your new capital also will be a very comfortable and beautiful city. Well, you know, we also changed capitals actually in Russia, from Moscow to St. Petersburg and back. Yeah. Yeah. So we say that we have two capitals now. Moscow, it's the oldest one, but then for 300 years, St. Petersburg was our capital, but then changed back to Moscow. So, yeah. Yeah, I think infrastructure is the obvious. Energy, of course. Your capital also will need a lot of energy. So infrastructure, energy, IT solutions for cities. In Moscow, you know, it's amazing. You know, I'm from Moscow myself, and how in the last 15 years Moscow has changed. Now, you know, all these online services, you don't need to move your finger, you know. Even, you know, government services, we have this wonderful online service. So anything you need from the government, I mean, to change your passport, to, I don't know, to get any social security, any documents you need, you just go online. You don't need to go to the office, to queue, you know, it's just, it's so convenient for people. Also, the system of public transportation in Moscow is amazing. You know, I see that people in Jakarta are very proud of their traffic jams. I can tell you, Moscow is not better. In terms of jams, it's not better, especially in winter when it snows. All the traffic can stop, but we have the advantage of having a very good system, underground railway system. We call it metro, and actually you can go to any part of the city just using the underground. You don't need to ride the bus or your car or even a taxi. It's all there if you need it. Taxis, very available. Buses are very good. Electrical buses, actually. Now in Moscow we use more and more electrical buses. But still people prefer to leave their cars at the outskirts of Moscow than take the underground. 40 minutes you are anywhere you want in the city. And it's one of the oldest underground systems in the world. We started building it in the 30s. And some of the stations are famous for its beauty. It's like a museum. It's, yeah, with statues and paintings, and yeah. So yeah, and it keeps developing. It's not something that has been built and it's there, it doesn't change. No, it's being developed by the government of Moscow. Every year there are new stations enters in operation. Now you can even go outside Moscow. Yeah, so not only in the Moscow, but outside Moscow as well. It's very comfortable. So yeah, there's a lot of things we can share. Well, of course, it's the trend, the global trend, of course, and of course we need to prevent our environment from getting worse. Maybe, you know, in Russia we also have this experience in using renewable sources of energy, but we rely mostly actually on nuclear in this, because in a sense it's also, you know, it's a green technology. If you take good care of the wastage, and then we do. Actually, usually it's also part of the contract that if we build a nuclear station, we also take care of the wastage. Yeah. So, but also in the Far East, for instance, we have solar station. You know, yeah, for us, solar is not. We don't have that much sun. Yeah. Yeah, but still, in some places, but this kind of technology, of course, they are still very expensive, because if you compare it to nuclear, to build a nuclear station is quite expensive, but the longer you operate it, the more cheap the energy becomes, because actually it's forever, you know, and you don't need a lot of fuel for that. It's by 10 years the price will drop tremendously. So and we have this very developed system. Of course, it doesn't mean that we don't need to look at other sources of energy. Again, I told you that we use a lot of hydro energy from the power of water. Yeah, it's also actually green energy. So yes, there's a lot of things we can do. About that, you know, all this situation with all the price caps on oil, etc., etc. It's of course it's absurd. It doesn't. You know, you need to understand that it has nothing to do with economy. It has everything to do with politics, because unfortunately the West is using anything as a political instrument. Again, what they are saying that they want to punish Russia. Yeah, they want to make Russian life of Russian people a misery. What is economic about that? You know, it's a purely political targets in order to make Russian people not happy, and then to overthrow the government and overthrow President Putin. It will never happen, of course, because it's not economic-driven measures. It's political-driven, and there are ways, of course, to, you know, overcome all this kind of things, and it's blackmail, and it's coercion, and it's done in purely political reasons that has nothing to do with the economy, and it's all the sanctions. It's absolutely absurd. We see how Europeans are shooting themselves in the leg, like by having, because I can tell you that if you ask me about the sanctions, they didn't work. They didn't work. You come to Moscow, you will see how people live. You know, they hope that, you know, there will be no food in the shops. Everything will, you know, everyone will leave and people will starve. Again, what's democratic about that? Yeah, these people are teaching us democracy. Yeah. So, but you go to Russia, you will see, and it's not only Moscow; it's other cities as well. We learned our lessons. We produce everything. We are self-sufficient in food. You go to any Moscow supermarket, you will see that everything is there, and basically it's all produced in Russia. Yeah. Actually, the prices are even cheaper than in Jakarta. Yeah. For some of the products. Yeah. Of course, mango is much more expensive, but because we have to import it. But locally produced, of course, it's quite cheap. So the sanctions didn't work because our government was prepared. It didn't start last year, actually. It started a long time ago, as long ago as 2014. So we learned our lessons. It's not that we're closed to dialogue and cooperation with other countries. It was not our choice. We don't want to be, to self-isolate. No, we want to develop cooperation with our good friends and partners like Indonesia. But basically, the policies were adjusted. If last year we've seen a contraction of our economy, not that significant actually, but this year there will be a growth, despite everything. Our GDP will be growing, and that's this year, and it's a fact. It's not only our assessment, is the IMF also confirmed that it will be maybe less than 2%, but it's not bad. The inflation in our country is less than 5% right now. It's lower than in Germany, which is not under sanctions. So what I'm trying to say that we've been prepared. Our economy proved to be very resilient. We're not isolated because we have many friends in the world who understand what is really happening, what this Ukrainian crisis is about. And for your understanding, the Ukrainian crisis, maybe it's not about business, but after all, politics are very important. It's not about Russia being in war with Ukraine. Ukrainians are our brothers and sisters. We are the same. We're the same nation. It's the problem that Ukraine is used by the West as an instrument against Russia, as a political and military instrument against Russia. Why do West doesn't want our country just to, exist normally? Because we don't agree with their dominance. We want to be treated as equals. But the problem is that these countries are not used to treating other countries as equals. You in Indonesia, you know that better than we do. Because their prosperity for centuries have been based on looting and robbing other countries. And why do we want to allow them to do so? We say no. We don't want to be looted or, our natural resources be exploited. We want to cooperate on an equal basis. That's what they cannot accept. And that's why they're using everything as a political instrument, and unfortunately as a military instrument. They don't want to, be in direct military confrontation with the nuclear power as Russia. But they use Ukraine, they use Ukrainians, and they don't care about Ukrainians. They don't care that Ukrainians are dying on the battlefield. They don't care that Russians are dying. That's their goal actually. But they don't care that Ukrainians are dying on the battlefield. We do care. We do care. We don't want. But the problem is that by engaging in this special military operation, we tried to prevent a bigger conflict from happening. Like our Western partners, whatever they say, we never interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries. So whatever the choice of Indonesian people, we go along, of course. I can only express hope that our bilateral relations will be getting stronger. because I think there is a good basis for that. As I said, we've always enjoyed this, for more than 70 years we've had good relations with Indonesia, and hopefully this will continue. It will not depend on the leadership, not in Indonesia, not in Russia. So. Diversify. That's the only way to diversify. Maybe to, as I told you, to focus on more value-added products from Russia, technologies, embrace other areas that are still not covered. So we have actually here also a trade mission, and they are working very hard on ways to develop and to make our bilateral trade more balanced. I also think that this free trade agreement will help a lot, that we are planning to have between the Eurasian Economic Union and the government of Indonesia.